would like to introduce Érica Alcocer into this platform of virtual learning and kind of open up this conversation for talking about her, excuse me, hold on. I would like to ask you about your pronouns.
Like you said previously, before we started recording, asked me for my pronouns and like mostly everything. Although it is very easy to figure out my pronouns, although they are changing, fluid. And I think I put that in, there's a really great article that I can't remember off the top of my head. I know I have it saved somewhere, or maybe it's a meme. I don't know. An info somewhere I saw that it's like, you don't have to give up your pronouns so easily. For some folks, like totally, I want to normalize asking for pronouns. I think that that's a really important action to do in a safe way, or model saying your pronouns. So like, when we announce ourselves, you can say my pronouns, my name, my pronouns, and then, you don't have to say like, what are your pronouns? That just models to a person that that's something important to you and that, you're attaching it to your name. So my pronouns are they, them, theirs. I've been shifting from they, she, but I really just feel comfortable and at home right now with they, them, theirs, and ella in Spanish. So I think that's why I put it. I put that because I'm like, I don't know where my pronouns are going to be situated in time. To me, I feel like my queerness is so fluid that it could change and reshape itself. So yeah, those are my pronouns. May I ask for your pronouns, Ashley?
Right now in my life, I'm she, her. Sometimes I do feel like she, her, but sometimes I feel like he, him. And then I'm like, well, they, them. So you're opening up so much in my mind, and thank you.
Yay.
How are you doing today? How are you? Do you feel well?
My parents live here. I live with my parents right now. And every day, we don't ask how we're doing, but we take note of it in some other way, shape, or form. And then in work meetings, there's like, we just want to do a check-in and see how everyone's doing. And I'm like, I'm fine, like moving on. Like, I'm just like, I don't have time to, not that I don't have time to listen to someone else, but I don't have time to share really, truly, deeply, how I'm feeling. And it is so complex because I am incredibly grateful and thankful to be in the space that I am, in a safe space. But at the same time, it's a constant reminder that I don't have my own space, that I'm, not in a stable place with me and my partner to even be able to get our own space. That is a challenge. And we're currently dealing with the separation of the relationship with our kiddo, with their kiddo, but we have our own little queer family that we made. And so every day I will wake up angry. I will wake up kind of like feeling a void of missing something, and then having really quickly to just be like, fuck it, like I can't deal with this right now. I need to move on. I have schoolwork, I have work, I have myself to take care of. Like I cannot wallow in this feeling. So it's this like series of feelings that I wake up every day doesn't here in the space. That's how I'm waking up. And then, I will go take the dogs on a walk. They're very consistent. We're very consistent with that. They're like, we know we're going on a walk. Let's go. And I'm like, okay, go stretch, go on a walk, start my routine. And so that routine really helps me find the space from those feelings, or to navigate those feelings in a way that I'm like, it feels catharsis. Like I'm like, okay, I've worked through this. I'm still angry, still really angry. I'm so angry for many reasons beyond losing that connection with our kiddo. But like, I'm like, okay, I recognize it. Let's go. And then I start my day and I continue with that gratitude. I think I continue with that gratitude because I am such a privileged person with so much power and access. And I need to be mindful of that, while also like acknowledging my areas of oppression and where I'm hurting, where I'm growing, where I'm finding joy and pleasure in. So yeah, that's the long answer.
Can you share with me a little bit about what that action looks like of being able to make space for yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like so much of it is also a somatic experience too for me. So I really want to check in with my body, like a scan, especially the fact that we live in COVID, you know, like, can I smell things? Can I taste things? Like my senses, I try to like pick up where my senses are. Um, because it connects me back to also like my spiritual self too. Like, you know, I'll go through my altares, and sometimes I'm really neglectful of my altares, and I can tell, and I'm always like I'm avoiding this for a reason. Like I know that I don't want to sit here with my altares and be like, oh, here we go, we're gonna deal with it, we're gonna go through it, we're gonna have this experience of whatever messages that they're gonna give to me in that time. So sometimes I wake up and I'm like, I honor you, I honor you. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, you know what, I'm honoring myself, I'm honoring this feeling. Or maybe I'm not getting out of bed, maybe I'm reaching for my phone and sitting on Instagram. But like I said, I have this fortunate here in the space, I have these animals that very much like dictate like what you're about to do. And so if I don't get out of the bed, my animal will come, my dog will come on the bed, and I'm like, oh my God, she's on the bed. And it's great and I love it, but she's so furry and my allergies are rough. So I'm like, okay, we gotta get you outside. You have energy. I know I want to do something with my energy, because I don't really know if I do have energy some days, but I know that I want to figure out where that energy is. So like going on a nice walk is helpful for me. I love doing that. I love being outside. I love like not taking my headphones, or maybe not even taking my phone, although that could not be safe for like a lot of reasons. But sometimes I will, especially if I have the dog and I'm just like, I'm going to walk here and there, come back, feel that little bit of sweat, smell that little bit of like nature that I can get, hear sounds that little bugs and animals are making, and then come back and say like, okay, well, you know, I don't know what happened in that time that I was in nature, but something may have processed or may have passed, and whatever is left over, like I will deal with in some way, whether it's posting, taking pictures, creative outlets, yeah, working out.
I saw some pictures that you had posted on Instagram where you went camping and you looked absolutely joyful. Like like if you were a bubble, you would have been like floating in the air to the sun and then popping into a million bubbles of happiness raining down on earth.
Yes.
Can you describe a little bit about your idea of what well-being means in your life for yourself
Yeah.
or others?
Yeah. I mean, well being, wow, it means like a process of really unlearning, I think, for sure. And like recognizing constantly your ableism, your fat phobia, depending on where you exist. Like I exist in a straight sized, you know, I will say able bodied in the way that like I can use my body. Like I don't have anything that's like been diagnosed. I live with pain, and it's like I recognize in some ways that because I don't have insurance, because I don't have a way to like get access to like what's really going on in my body, I can only say like extend the able-bodiedness to an extent because I don't have that knowledge. I just know that like I, you know, like I can use my hands, I can use my sight, I can do things that people who are physically disabled or disabled in a way that alters that ability don't. And so checking in with that, like understanding my ableism, understanding my like so much of and even like, you know, my depression, my anxiety, um what works for that in ways like I, you know, I've been on medication. I took Zoloft and it really helped me so much. Oh, so much. I'm so thankful for that. And it was rough. It was a super rough time. So I really feel like, you know, it's not linear, but it's also a practice of understanding where you exist in your privileges, right? And where your ideas of well-being, how they can oppress or like hurt others. And then also like decolonizing, like you said, Ashley, perfectly, like, yeah, as an AFAB person, but I identify as non-binary, you know, my ideal looking of like what I wanted my body to look like and fit that aesthetic was a very colonized, very hypersexual way of being. And like, that was just not, it's not possible for my body. My body, you know, has a different way of forming. And so I had to unlearn that. And then, so many different things. And I think that having to unlearn that was part of my idea of understanding what my well-being is and can be.
Thank you for mentioning going to take Zoloft for depression. So many times in the wellness atmosphere, it's pushed that through prayer, through meditation, through spiritual practices, you can, you know, get these things under control and you won't have to use medication. If you use medication, it's a sign of weakness, but that is not true at all. All of these things are complementary in ways, and they have different ratios of how they can be used at different times in life.
Another thing I really wanted to mention was, I think aspects of my well-being are obviously very connected to the anti-oppression and anti-racist work that I dedicate myself to, and like confronting lots of ways in which all of the things that are the interlocked white supremacist, cis, heteronormative patriarchal system that we live in, the capitalism, like all of this, like how also like how I participate, how I'm oppressed, like all of these understandings where I'm able to create change, that is really deeply connected to my wellness, because it gives me this allows me to use my framework, my feminist like framework, to find, like, I feel like that's a huge part of it too, like everything that you were saying, like the ableism is so like wrought, but then also in the wellness community, so much racism, anti-blackness, appropriation, like pan-cultural appropriation, it's just so much. And this idea of like, you know, you've healed your spirit and it doesn't matter your skin color. And I'm just like, what does that mean? What is this like movement to like to say I am for Black lives, but also hold the rhetoric of saying like, well, you know, cops need healing, cops need ayahuasca. I can't. I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's a mess. The wellness industry is a mess. It's a mess. Oh, it's a mess.
So do you think that wellness and well-being can be reclaimed for the people without it being associated so much to the industry? And if so, how do you propose we go about that?
A question I think about a lot in my studies with like understanding curanderismo, borderland curanderismo. It is so complicated, right? Like reclaiming, reconnecting, I think is a way that we like use decolonization as a metaphor, but there's so many other aspects of what decolonizing means, right? Decolonizing means like, okay, like sure, connect back to that, but like at who's benefiting from it? You know what I'm saying? Like who's benefiting from that, your wellness? Like only you? Because wellness to me is like the wellness of communities that I'm fighting for liberation, like Black folks, Afro-Indigenous folks, Black Native folks, non-Black Native and Indigenous peoples, trans folks. Like that's, you know, my wellness journey is deeply connected to the fight for liberation that I want to be an ally and accomplice to. And so is it liberating for just me when I like connect with curanderismo and I'm like, I'm all of a sudden a womb healer, I'm all of a sudden, you know, taking people to ayahuasca retreats? Like who's healing from that and who's centered in that, right? You know, is it the indigenous communities in Colombia and Peru? I don't think so. And there's a whole, my whole study is over lots of the entitlement and the centering of a settler ego, because like we're all born into white supremacy, a settler colonial state. We're born into it. It is like, you know, the air around us and that we breathe, and therefore it is a part of us. And so shedding that isn't a one-time thing. You don't be like, oh my God, I, you know, did ayahuasca, I did peyote, I did combo rape, like, and I'm totally, it's just out of me. I'm like, no, It's not how that works. And also touting it to be a cure-all is, I think, super ableist. And that I'm not doubting the authenticity and the power of the medicine. I never want to do that. But I think that there's so much responsibility in the way in which we choose to reconnect with that aspect of our culture. And it goes with understanding your proximity to white supremacy, your proximity to, like, at what point do I get to say all my ancestors and I'm claiming literally all of Mexico, all of the Southwest, all of Central and Sudamerica, Latin America, all the, you know what I'm saying? Because like my existence is all of that history from 1492 to right now. And there's a lot of shit that goes on in between there. I don't want to just cherry pick like, oh, da, 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 and now I'm a healer and now I am entitled to this information and this knowledge because of my ancestors. I'm like, yo, I gotta honor and recognize other aspects of this that is me and that is my existence as a non-Black person, and a person with Indigenous ancestry and a descendant of Indigenous folks, but also a descendant of probably settler folks too. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's a lot.
Yes, it is. So I am seeing and hearing a lot of connection of your wellness being attached to your ability to be conscientious about your place in this society that we have at this time, the power that you do have, and the also necessary steps that you need to take in order to ensure that you are working within a frame of everybody's liberation, not just your own.
And I've had to do a lot of work to go back and unlearn and like unsettle, decenter my settler ego, right? Because my life was like, actually, like I did yoga for like 7 years. I was in the yoga community. I worked at a yoga studio, had a yoga partner, doing yoga competitions, was doing the juice cleanses, was doing the chakras. I was in it. It's so easy to go from that path and be like, this is because you feel so good. Like you are high on yoga life. You are high on all the endorphins that are released when you're doing that much practice. And like around people that are like, oh my God, yes, like everything positive. Yes. Without a sense of reality of like what is happening. So getting out of that and coming into the space that I am now, I'm like, I can see that path because I was on that path. I was living that path. I was probably very much not an accomplice in anything, but I was like appropriating things, right? And so I get to this point and I realize I'm an assimilated person. I realize that a lot of these culture, traditions, practices, medicine, attachment to the all of that has been robbed because I'm a 4th generation Mexican American person, right? And through cultural genocide and colonization and imperialism, like I've lost that. Now I recognize that, right? And I know that it's not, how am I saying, like people are like, you just don't want people to go for it. I'm like, no, but there's a pathway to these medicines, and it's not that I don't want people, but when you absorb it, when you take like knowledge and stuff like that, and you are a U.S. citizen and you have the ability to travel to Peru, travel here, travel there, you live in a condo in LA, you live in a lake house, or I don't know, like apartment here in Austin, like what is the authenticity from the people who still practice that? Because those people aren't gone, right? There's indigenous people in the Amazons, there's indigenous people in Mexico, curanderas, who ask you for 200 pesos for a limpia, versus here we have people $180, $100 who are arguably settler, non-Black people of color, who pass themselves like, I'm a curandera because I'm brown and because I can put on this outfit, I can put on this these huipiles and I can transform, but you can take that off and you can walk in the street and you can live and exist here in both spaces, in all spaces, as a US citizen. So it's like really understanding that, like, where's the indigenous liberation in that? For who is that for, right? You know, like, I'm decolonizing, I'm doing limpias, like, I'm passing on this medicine, and I'm like, okay, cool, but like, are indigenous people being liberated? Are their countries being liberated? Is their government being less occupied by the US? Like, like what? Mm-hmm. No? Then what? What's happening?
Yeah.
Who's being healed?
We have to do a lot of work, right, to take care of ourselves, but sometimes it's nice to be taken care of. How do you like to be taken care of?
Oh, I'm so well taken care of by my partner, Luca, that I love more than anything. And arguably by my pets. You know, it's a mutual, you know, I give you food, I give you pets, and you give me like my therapy as a big fluffy dog to hug. My partner is like a Virgo all the way. They are just like this selfless, beautiful Virgo who will bring me food, who will bring me tea, who I'm just like, I'm really bad at feeding myself. I come from a highly disordered eating background, and battle with that. I guess I will be battling with that for my whole life. And so I will just, you know, not think of eating, and I will just not do it. I just be like, it's fine. I don't need to eat. Keep going. So being fed is one of my favorite things. And like, and you know, we also have a space of where being taken care of is like my partner making the food and then me eating it with them. And like, that's part of that sort of eating that I'm not used to, is like, you know, being accountable to sitting and eating, and not just that, but like sharing the time and space with the person that made the food for me, right? You know, so I really work on that, and that's taking care of me on so many different levels, like very different levels. And then with my friends, like, I just love calling and talking and checking in, and love languages like webinars, doing webinars together, learning new things together about, you know, transformative justice, restorative justice, accountability. And I think that that's like, yeah, being taken care of 100%. Being held accountable doesn't feel pleasurable or joyous in any way. It feels very uncomfortable. It feels really just like, it can be, you know, shattering at times, and then you come back from that, and I feel like I love that building space of restorative, you know, whatever it is that I'm doing and practicing internally, externally, in the community, is so important. And I think that that is a way that I'm super thankful to be taken care of by my friends, by my community, you know, by some of my family members. So yeah, those are the ways I feel taken care of by myself. By buying makeup, I'm obsessed with buying, like, obviously, like anything I can just like paint colorful, dyeing my hair. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for sharing. And what is one red flag for you when you are not taking care of yourself that makes you say, wow, I'm spinning out of control?
Oh, a red flag for me is spending way too much time on Instagram so that my hands will physically hurt, because I'm just like, and I even have, I will show you. So I'll be like, this is fine, I'm fine. And that's a really red flag, because it means I'm dissociating really, really hardcore. Like, I'm just like sucked into my phone. I'm sucked into another world. That's a red flag. I think another red flag for me is not stretching. You know, like, I would say I've been a yoga practitioner for a really long time. What I do now is definitely not considered yoga, so I'm not going to label it as yoga, but I do like to stretch.
Is there, let's actually, I have one last closing statement or question. If you could say something for everybody who's listening or watching to give a try to perhaps connect on a deeper level with themselves or their community, what would be a baby step that people could start to take to to become a little bit more conscientious about their role in the well-being of themselves within the context of community?
I think something I would really suggest is like just decentering, like really decentering your settler ego, or like decentering the ego that white supremacy and the, you know, settler colonial state that we live in, like, asks you to center. And it's also good to be selfish sometimes, you know, totally okay to be selfish. It's not a one way or the other. It's, you know, that fluidity, and also understanding that fluidity in so many things like gender and sexuality, and it exists in so many spaces, and applying that to, you know, to your well-being, so that it doesn't, like, a constant thing I struggle with is like, I have a goal. I'm like, right now I really want to build muscle. I want to feel stronger, right? And I'm trying to disconnect from like, I want my body to change. So, you know, like I'll hold my bonsa, I'll touch my fat and I feel it, and it feels super different, you know, than like my muscly parts of my body. And I'm like, okay, well, I love you, but like I want us to be stronger, and I'm not tying my, you know, bonsa to not being stronger. I'm like, well, like stronger for me is like acknowledging and loving that part of myself, right? That's also strength, not just physical strength, like my mental strength. And like, again, like that brings me back to my fluidity of being like, what do I consider strength to be, right?
So could we say, you know, if you are new in this path of liberation for yourself and your community, start to ask, but is it though? To everything that you hear that's a so-called fact.
Oh yeah. Challenge things. You know, come to your own conclusions, but, you know, have them peer reviewed, right, by your queer community, by your community building. Yeah, for sure. I am on Tankawa Indigenous Territory, which is also known as North Austin. And yeah, I'm from San Antonio, which is Somisek territory, home of the Anawana, and other indigenous tribes like Comicrudo, the Colhuitecan, and I think that it's super important to make these land acknowledgements, because, you know, we are on non-liberated land, and if anything that I said is talking about Indigenous liberation, Black liberation, Afro-Indigenous liberation, Afro-Latinx liberation, it is very much tied to liberation of the land, and to repatriating the land to Indigenous peoples to steward. And to my knowledge, I know that I was born in San Antonio, but I consider myself to be a settler on the land that I am now, because I was not born in Round Rock. Nor do I have many ties, familial ties to the space. So, yeah. I hope you do yours. Do you want to? Yeah. Do you know yours?
I do. I'm currently outside of a town called Pátzcuaro, Michoacan, and this is the land to an indigenous group called Purépecha. And there are multiple indigenous groups in Michoacan, so many. This is the home to so many indigenous groups, but at this time, the one that I'm aware of where I'm staying is the Purépecha.
Awesome.
Érica, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.